this is the future us. From an hour later that we forgot to say, subscribe this, you freaking beautiful person, you, and like and comment. We're going to warp back into our...
I guess that leads us right into this, the current assault on Rafah. So all of the ceasefire was on Monday, and it can't be a coincidence, or at least I would be shocked to learn that it's a coincidence that Israel denied the ceasefire claim, because they had already had plans to invade Rafah. They couldn't very well accept a ceasefire deal and then invade Rafah. I think that they were going to invade Rafah because they wanted to invade Rafah.
Yeah.
So on Tuesday, Israeli troops seized the Rafah crossing on the southeast corner of Gaza. It's on the Egyptian border. Maybe we'll put that image here if you
I could do that.
Corner of Gaza on the Egyptian side, or on the Egyptian side, on the Israeli side of Gaza. Troops went in. They seized that crossing. There's been reported pretty heavy fighting, rockets, mortars, pretty heavy fighting as Israeli troops push deeper and deeper into Rafah. It's a heavily civilian populated area. This is one of it's the bottom left corner of Gaza. So as the fighting is kind of on the outside of Gaza, civilians are kind of going further into western Rafah, and that's also where Israel told civilians to go, was to western Rafah, and then they bombed western Rafah.
I don't know if you guys originally or remembered from a few months ago, as they kept pushing them farther south, they just basically came to like the Egyptian borders. Like, where are we going to go now? Well, now what they're doing is they're pushing them from the east toward the west.
To the west, the bottom left corner of Palestine.
Yeah, so they're the southwest corner of Gaza.
I'm saying bottom left. Thank you. The southwest is the more accurate way to say that.
The southwest corner of Gaza is where they're essentially pushing them. They say, if you go west, it's going to be, the safe zone, per se. But as we know of previous Israel lies, they go to the safe zone and they get bombed.
Yeah, this was one of the very first things we reported on, when it was the bombings of Israel, when they were dropping and telling people to go, this is the route out of town, and then they bombed that route. Yeah. It's a very similar thing they've done here. They told people to go to this area, and then they bombed it. And then now with the land invasion, they're kind of coming in from the east, pushing into Rafah from the east. So far, 80,000 civilians have fled, and thousands more are attempting to flee. There are apparently aid has now not been allowed in for these 3 days. Nothing has been allowed in or out since the 3 days since kind of this kicked off. So aid is crucial, and there are. As always, it was
that's just the conditions were itself.
Yeah, the conditions were always pretty bleak, but now with this kind of new land invasion, things are getting even worse. There are reports of and this is an Israeli tactic that I've heard used during prior physical engagements, like not strikes, but in actual troop combat, is where they will be using these quadcopters to play sounds from the speakers of either calls for help, babies crying, the sounds of laughter, some audio cue that gets people that gets Palestinians hiding to kind of show themselves, and where they're just shooting people. And I think, as far as I can tell, it's they're not seeking out Hamas doing this. They're just shooting out Palestinians. They're just shooting Palestinians that they see on site, which is, again, just murdering civilians is a war crime.
Yeah. And what they'll say is that we're using it to lure Hamas out, and then we're shooting at Hamas.
That's what they always say, right? That school is filled with Hamas.
So basically, people in Gaza are being squeezed like an orange, getting people getting an orange ready for a fucking soft drink. Yeah, they're getting squeezed into a corner until, I think what they're trying to do is either they all die, or they all jump into the ocean, or the sea, or they all just run into Egypt.
Yeah,
so I think the end goal was again ethnic cleansing. They're trying to cleanse them out of the area, push them out of the area.
Yeah,
they're obviously not mass murdering every single Gazan, because there would be 2.3 million people. Realistically, that'd be a lot of people to kill.
Well,
and also be way more.
As we're approaching these famine conditions, or we're past famine conditions, but we're approaching the point of no return. Yes. That's always that's how you effectively destroy a population, right, is through famine. It's inefficient to shoot people one by one in the long term. It's every like genocide in history is running up against this problem of logistically it's very hard to kill 2 million people, and this is going to be kind of a callous conversation, but it is what it is. Like logistically it's hard to kill 2 million people, and like the Nazis found this early in the days of like the Holocaust in 39, 40,
so they 41. Had to basically manufacture like a production line.
Yeah, it was the concentration camp system came out of necessity from like the mobile, what was it called, the Einsatzgruppen, like the mobile killing squads. It was inefficient. It's just like shooting people is not an efficient way. War is not an efficient way to exterminate a people. But famine is, if you like can starve them. And the Nazis felt
we already have confirmed famine.
Yeah,
not like
because
recently it was like, oh, we're on the brink of famine. Well, now we're past that point. We've hit famine in northern Gaza.
I think it was like mid-June was kind of like the date, or was it early June? I think was the date that we had originally like heard that was like if nothing changes by early June, like that's when the bodies are really going to start dropping, is just from hunger, and from like that was the projected kind of time is late May, early June, maybe it was mid-June at the latest. I can't remember.
And it might have been delayed just slightly because of the ceasefire for whatever the 2 weeks was.
Right, that 2 week Ramadan.
Yeah, so that might have helped, but so now we're looking at famine in northern Gaza slowly creeping down towards central Gaza, and God knows when it's going to finally strike Rafah, but when it does, I mean, we're talking about 1.5 million people in Rafah, and once people don't have anything to eat, they're going to have to make a decision. It's either they flee their homeland, and they give in to the Israelis,
or they stay and die.
Or they start eating each other. I mean, it's gruesome, but that's like realistically, it's just like there's
kind
no
of
food.
What happens in these scenarios sometimes. And then internationally, Netanyahu's and just the Israeli government is receiving heavy criticism from most countries, even America. Biden was very much like opposed to this. He kind of like had said like, do not do this, we'll cut off aid, and then they did it anyway. But Netanyahu says that Israel will, quote, stand alone, end quote. So I don't know, Bibi's lost his mind. He's just like, I think he's just kind of out for blood. He just wants the extermination of the Palestinian people, and
he's never had a mind.
He's fair enough. So like he's just, I don't think he really cares about what internationally the reputation is of Israel.
What's anybody going to do? That's the problem. It's just like, and this is what I keep saying about fucking Egypt, bro. Just fucking step in.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this is back to bring this back home a little bit again. Senate Republicans have threatened to sanction the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. If they issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, just like they did for Putin. The American Republicans have come out in full throat support of Netanyahu, regardless of any kind of findings. They don't care about the facts or the findings. They just care that they got their Israeli, their baby they got to protect. Tom Cotton, as you will know, the Republican senator from Arkansas, the guy who was interviewing what's his name, the TikTok CEO, the racist comments about asking him if he was a Chinese communist.
Senator, I'm
Singaporean. You'll remember Tom Cotton. He has, quote, target Israel and we will target you, end quote. He wrote in a letter threatening to sanction any employees and associates and bar you and your families from the United States. So any member of the United Nations or the ICJ that in any way threatens to hold Israel accountable for their crimes, I guess, is essentially what he's saying. Any attempt to hold Israel accountable will be met with this, and obviously this is just bluster. I don't think that it's a Democratic-controlled Senate. I mean, I don't know how far any of this would actually go.
But let me get this right. But a lot of the Democrats would flip
over.
But
a lot of the Democrats
they don't want to
appear. They don't want to appear soft on Israel.
Yeah.
Or hard
but
on Israel.
Let me get this right. The United States, a so-called secular government, an independent government, is threatening the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, something they helped set up after World War II.
If they do their job.
If they do their job. So if it's us doing it, absolutely not. No, nobody touch. Well, we control the world, right? But if somebody else does it, The Hague.
Yeah.
The Hague.
It's just absolute insanity. And this just goes back to this constant thing we're talking about of like this incredible, like intermingling of Israel and America, how American police are trained in Tel Aviv, all of like the Atlanta city cops, that was like IDF sponsored training sessions. The NYPD, the LAPD are both, I think, trained in Tel Aviv by the IDF and the Israeli like the police and military. How you can be an Israeli soldier, a former Israeli soldier, and run for Congress in America. Like how we just like we seem to just not give a fuck about national security or like kind of like sovereignty when it comes to Israel. And I think like the obvious answer to that is, well, because Israel is just an American outpost in the Middle East. Or at this point, I mean, it actually looks like America is an outpost in the Western Hemisphere of Israel. America is a Western Hemisphere branch of Israel is what it be. I mean, we're just the Bank of Israel. And I mean, it's just like everyone's lost their mind.
Nobody touched Daddy Israel.
Yeah, we feel like crazy people sitting here and being like, what is happening? Like, how can we just like have such a huge, and like, I'm not some jingoist that's like, America for Americans. Like, I don't really give a fuck about that, but like, it's just saying, but they do, right? That's what they claim. If a Chinese company is operating in America, everyone loses their goddamn mind. But actual soldiers can train our troops. Like, actual soldiers can run for our government.
If a Chinese company is operating in America, but then you have an Israeli soldier operating in your Congress.
Yeah. It's just like what is going on? It just seems crazy to me. And so anyway, that was just a little short story. I saw very briefly that Senate Republicans were threatening to sanction ICJ, and I just had to include that because it's just relevant to like the amount of like they will bend over backwards to protect Israel at all costs.